Hey y'all, it's K-Bird Tweets, and this is Peace, Love, and Baseball. Welcome back to another episode of Peace, Love, and Baseball, friends and fans. Hey, this is our last episode of 2023, which is pretty crazy. I can't believe it. But as I mentioned on last week's episode, I am very excited to welcome one of my best friends. Her name is Megan onto the show. And Megan's expertise is far and wide. She is both a small town and a city dweller. She is a worldwide traveler. And she is what I like to refer to as a common sense connoisseur. So, Megan, thank you for joining me tonight. How are you doing this very festive season?
Oh, I'm great. Keeping very busy. I just wrapped all of my Christmas presents today in one go. I
Nice.
feel very accomplished because it took quite a while.
Yeah,
But it feels good to have it done. We only have 8 days, so all
that is
days are
so true.
here.
Christmas Eve is a week from today. We're recording on
Yeah,
Sunday. This episode is going to come out on Tuesday. So, yeah, it will be less than a week away from the day, the big
yeah,
day, as people are listening to this. But you're good about being on top of stuff like that. Me, I'm
I
still waiting
try.
for everything to roll in, onto my front porch so I can ask my husband to wrap it because I also am completely incapable of wrapping gifts. But that is another thing that maybe we'll talk about at the end of this episode of when we tell people where they can follow you. And obviously they can find that in the show notes too. But you also have some very unique visual talents and you do great makeup tutorials and all that kinds of stuff, which is something else that I know nothing about. So you're a great resource there too. But anyway, you're here today for a very serious purpose, and that is to get the general public on the right foot for the start of the new year. So Megan and I met back in 2007
Ooh,
doing yeah,
that
it
was
was
a
kind of
while
like a
ago.
couple years ago, doing a musical called High School Musical. Maybe you've heard of it. If you're a millennial, then surely you have. But we were in the regional premiere of High School Musical in our area. We became local celebrities together. And then a handful of years later, we moved to New York City, where we adopted our brother cats and were roommates for years. And that is ultimately where this idea was born. Megan, do you remember when or like how we initially came up with this idea? Was it originally we were going to write a book, right? Called You're Stupid, We're Better.
Yeah, we thought like maybe a little handbook would be helpful. People could keep it with them, if they really needed that much serious help. Or otherwise, it could just be something that they read and have available to research, when needed.
Yeah, some people might have it as like a coffee table book. Some people might need it right in their front pocket, some in their
Yeah.
back pocket, but I like the handbook idea. There's something to that for sure. So maybe when this podcast episode really takes off, there'll be such a demand for it. We can put it out there. But yeah, that is the prime focus of today's episode is we got submissions from you, our listeners, and we actually got a number of really similar ones. So we kind of organized it into some different categories. And we are going to cover New Year's resolutions for the general public today. These are not things like there is no hot takes. There's really no hot takes here. I think if you've made it this far, if you're a Peace, Love, and Baseball listener, you're probably going to have experienced a lot of these things, but also be like, yeah, why the hell do people do that? So like, don't be afraid that we're going to offend you because I really don't think there's anything here. It's nothing like really opinion based or like, obviously there's all kinds of things in the world that we don't see eye to eye on these days. Totally fine. Here to be very respectful of all of that. These are not those things. These are like, you're, walking down the street and there's 5 people walking next to each other and they just can't consolidate it all to let you pass by. It's like those kinds of things, right? So you will
Totally.
catch on as soon as we get into it. But before we get into the nitty gritty and really go for it and do this public service that we are here to do, I do want the listeners to get to know just a little bit about you. And we're going to establish your credibility here is really, I
All
think,
right.
what this is, because the accumulation of your life experience is Well, first of all, I should say that Megan's here with me because her and I like see eye to eye on all these things. So, and not just these things, but a lot of other things too. So when we would, come home at the end of the day from a long, hard day of living in our early 20s in New York City, we would just sit together and watch our cats and share war stories of like, this is what happened to me today. Can you believe people are so dumb? And that's very much how this idea was born. But yeah, we all need those friends who, you can share anything with them and be like, can you believe that? And they're going to be like, yeah, what the hell? Like, what is wrong with them? You are perfect. Obviously, the rest of the world is messed up. So Megan is absolutely that person for me. But she's also been a really great baseball friend, even though she is not a baseball fan. She is the kind of non-baseball fan that all of us baseball fans dream of having as a friend, because we moved to New York City in 2011, which is the year that the Cardinals won the World Series. And then we were there again in 2013 when they were in the World Series. And Megan, do you remember we went to Boston on what was supposed to be game 7 of the World Series, which did not happen because they lost in 6 games. But Megan and I still went to Boston together. We had friends who were flying in from Central Illinois that we met there. And even though it was the World Series parade in Boston, Megan made sure that us Cardinals fans kept our heads held high and had a great time. So I also remember, Megan, you were really committed and you were really into it at points. Do you remember when you made a signature cocktail for Shane Robinson called
Ooh,
the Sugar Shane?
it sounds very much like something I would do, because that is something I do enjoy. I don't remember that specifically, but again, it tracks.
Yeah, it definitely happened. It was called the Sugar Shane. And
Ooh,
I don't
nice.
know, next time the picture comes up in my memories, I'll have to share it on the socials. But yeah, you were just always really supportive, really on board. It doesn't hurt that there's hot guys in baseball pants to look at. That I'm sure that was, made it a little easier for you. But I've always really appreciated that. So we're going to talk a little bit kind of baseball related things, but also just more so about you and your life and how you got here. So let's take it all the way back to the very
All right.
beginning. You are a long ways from where you grew up now, but you grew up in a little town called Danvers, Illinois, right in the middle of the state, even smaller than the town that I grew up in. Do you know what was the population of Danvers?
When I lived there, it was, like, just over 1,000.
Wow, just
Yeah,
over
and
a thousand.
I remember seeing it on the sign, like, when I would drive back from, because my high school wasn't even in my town, I had to drive pretty far, and
Right.
coming back in, like, "Welcome to Danvers, population," it was, like, 1,180 or something like that. It was
Wow.
very small.
Yeah, because I mean, I would say I'm from a small town too, but I think there was about 11,000 people in my town when I was growing up there, and like my high school was in my town. But anyway, so small town behavior, small town folks listening, Megan knows exactly what it's like to be you day to day. But as an adult, Megan has lived in Chicago, New York City, as well as the Phoenix area in Arizona, and now in Orlando. So you've also traveled to like more places than I could possibly count. So not only have
Mhm.
you lived in a couple of the biggest cities in the country, you've also lived on different sides of the country. And how many countries have you been to? Do you know?
Ooh, that's a good question. At least 7.
Yes.
Probably right around 7. I don't think I've hit double digits, but I'm probably pretty close.
Yeah, that's awesome. So again, just establishing some credibility here, lots of different lived and shared experiences. But now there's some really important things that I need to get your opinion on. Let's start with this one. You are at the ballpark. You've been
Okay, I'm
to
ready.
many baseball games, enjoyed taking them in. You're at the ballpark. Are you getting nachos or a soft pretzel?
That's a good one. At a game, I'd have to go with nachos. Both snack. I feel like nachos are easier to consume in your seat while you have, an ice cold beer in your other hand. A soft pretzel, I'm gonna want my cheese sauce and some kind of a mustard sauce. I need more space for a soft pretzel. If I'm at a bar, the soft pretzel is always what I order. But I
So
do love
yeah,
that
it is
fake cheese.
very location specific. That's a
Yes.
good call out. Well, my next question, you kind of just referred to an ice cold beer, so maybe I already know the answer, but you're at the ballpark, beer or margarita from the margarita machine?
Probably, ooh, that's a hard one. I gotta say probably a beer, just because there's something about it, it just hits a little bit different. But those machines, they have a lot of really cool, like, robot machines now. So I
Yeah.
got a pretty cool cocktail recently at a football game, and it was something I saw on TikTok, and I was like, "I have to go to this robot machine that makes you a cocktail." And it was very overpriced, and it was very
Sure.
fun. But again, the beers, they're a little more consistent, you know what you're getting, and you usually save a couple bucks too.
That's a good call out. Yeah, you can have, like, a better margarita somewhere else, but
Mhm.
some of the best beer you're gonna drink, maybe it's the atmosphere. It's gonna be at the ballpark. I love it.
Yeah.
All right, this is a highly contested question among sports fans, I think, but especially among baseball fans.
Alright.
I need to know, are you pro wave or anti doing the wave at sporting
Oh,
events?
pro for sure. It's so much fun.
So, I mean, I guess I'll be supportive of that because if I was at a football game or a basketball game, which, like, I don't follow, I surely would do the wave. I get annoyed with it at baseball games because I feel like it only happens when people like, the game is like a blowout or you're around a group of people that are not paying attention at all that decide they wanna start it, and then it's even more annoying because if the game is close, you're like, "I'm trying to watch what's happening," and you're not being a part of that, but
That's
it is
valid.
it is fun. We're all very split on this, and I think it is circumstantial ultimately, but
Yes. I
all right.
will say, like, it happened at a football game recently, and it was like a timeout had been called, or there was a break in quarters. It wasn't like during the actual, like, nobody was doing anything, which you get more of that in other kinds of sports. So maybe it's not for baseball, and I've never.
See, this is establishing credibility because that's just a really good way of looking at things, a really good call out. It is
But it is
different
fun.
based on the sport, based on the circumstances. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this one. In your opinion, do you have a sports mascot that you believe is elite? A best sports
Oh,
mascot?
100%. I do, and I have an ornament of him right here.
Oh, love
I'm
it.
gonna see if I can get it down without knocking down the whole tree. While I get him down, his name is Stuff. He's a magic dragon. Oh, this would work better if I could stand up, but I really am stuck to the ground. Oh, okay, hang on. We almost have him. Anyway, he is the mascot of the Orlando Magic.
Oh,
And
okay.
he's newer to me because I'm a new Magic fan, I will admit. Here we go. Look at this
Oh,
dragon.
he's really cute.
He's very cute. I will say the first time I ever saw Stuff, it was a chalk drawing at a bar, and I was very concerned as to what it was because
Mm.
imagine as a chalk drawing, you don't know who this is. And I was quite concerned, and I mentioned that to my boyfriend, and I was like, Derek, what is that? And the look he gave me, I knew I had messed up immediately. I was like, "Oh," I said,
Clearly, I
"Please
better learn.
educate me." Yeah, so then I learned about Stuff, and then I have since met Stuff, and Stuff he's just a lot of fun. So yeah, I believe Stuff to be number 1.
He is super cute. I support that. All right, back to the baseball game. I mean, I guess you could do this at other sports games too, but I always think of hot dogs, or I always think of baseball when I think about hot dogs. What toppings, as someone who has lived in Chicago, lived in New York, lived all over, what toppings are you
Mhm.
putting on your hot dog?
My absolute favorite, especially at a stadium where your choices are limited, mustard, and then if they have relish, it's going on there.
Ooh, yeah.
That's all I need.
Mustard and relish. That's your
Yeah,
dream hot dog. So
that's the
so
dream
no
hot
no
dog.
ketchup, not gonna be caught dead
N
with it.
no ketchup. I've learned the older I get, I don't really like ketchup.
I only like it on fries.
Yeah. If
That's
it's
what
on
does
my plate, I'll probably dip a couple fries in there, but if I have to pick up the bottle and choose to put it on my plate, I probably won't have any.
Yeah, that's a good call out too. Can't argue with it. All right, one more before we get down to our resolutions for 2024. You have been to a number of baseball games. As I mentioned, you have visited Wrigley Field here in Chicago, as well as Yankee Stadium, probably
Mhm.
Yankee Stadium quite a few more times over the years. But at Wrigley, they play that lovely anthem. I'm sorry, I'm trying not to barf. They play "Go Cubs Go" when the Cubs win, but if they don't win, they don't play that song. So we were actually talking about this earlier this year, the last time that you were at a Yankees game. that a big point of contention among Yankees fans is that they play the song New York, New York, whether they win or lose at Yankee Stadium.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of Yankees fans that are like, this just doesn't work for me. Like there needs to be a different vibe in the stadium. So first, I want to know how you feel about this. Do you think they should have a different song?
Well, like you said, this is something that I had not realized was a thing. I think maybe when I've gone to games and they're losing and there's no chance they're gonna win, I have exited and maybe I just didn't ever hear an ending song. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think it should be different because New York, New York, it is very iconic. It feels very exciting. You're in New York. It's very celebratory,
It is.
and everyone really gets into it. And if they've just lost, especially if it was like a devastating loss, nobody
Right.
wants to have that, like, party moment. They're kind of like, "Well, that sucked, and I'd like to leave." Or, like I said, they've already left. So, it doesn't
Yes.
really work for me.
I agree. The vibe just needs to be different.
Yeah.
And especially that's such a good point. If it's like 11-2 and it's been that way since the fourth inning and you're just like, sticking it out because you paid for the ticket. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the last thing you want is to hear that
Mm-mm.
blaring speakers and feel like you're supposed to be celebrating. So I guess I'll just put you on the spot here. It's all right if you don't have a suggestion, but do you have a suggestion for what song they might play if they
Oof.
lost?
That is a good one. I feel like you still wanna try to keep the vibes positive because 'cause we're not trying to, celebrate that we didn't lose either. Um, I don't know the specific song, but there's other New York songs, whether it's by an artist who is iconic New York or a song about New York. I feel like you could pick a different one of those and just maybe also play it softer.
There you
We
go.
don't need to have it blaring. I
There
don't
you go.
know.
These questions have worked exactly as I wanted them to just set up like how even keeled you are, like, not making any rash decisions, but also just like, oh, I never even thought like maybe they could just, yeah, play it softer. That alone changes the vibes. And it
Yeah,
doesn't need to be the same song every time they lose. It could be a different song. There's only, hundreds of thousands of songs about New York. So,
yeah, this is true.
an
They
artist
are endless.
New
Mhm.
York. So good call out there. Okay, well, as I mentioned, we have a number of submissions from listeners, and some of them were like weirdly specific, but a lot of them all kind of came down to these same ones that we're going to go over today. So we have five different categories, and then a general category that we'll wrap up with. So we're going to hit some small town behaviors because obviously Megan and I have both lived in small towns. And there's, plenty of people out there that still do. We're going to talk about some big city behaviors because we've had personal experience with that as well. Roommate and or neighbor behaviors, which Megan and I have far too much experience with, and we'll try not to spend all our time there. Travel behaviors, which Megan surely will have more to say on than me, but surely things we can all relate to. And we got the most of driving behavior submissions, which is of no surprise, especially if you are someone who drives every day.
Mhm.
Then we'll wrap up with some general ones that didn't necessarily fit in one of these categories. So Megan, let's go back to that small town first. And our first annoying behavior of the general public today that we are going to talk to them about of maybe resoluting in 2024, aka you're stupid, we're better. We're going to tell you how to be better. Uh, this one is in small towns, sometimes people can be very unwelcoming of newcomers. And when I saw this one, I'm not sure if it was my brother who submitted it, but it might have been because he recently moved to a smaller town in Wisconsin and they put up a fence in their yard, which there was not a fence, but they had a pretty sizable yard. And there were a number of his neighbors that were less than thrilled. And like, instead of, having a conversation with him about it, which first of all, like he owns the property, so they don't really have a say in it to begin with. But if they did have feelings about it for whatever reason, it's a very nice looking fence, by the way. They could, have a conversation, but no, instead they just like shoot him dirty glances and like, don't invite him in for trick or treating and stuff like that. So,
Hmm.
have you had any experience with that of people maybe in the town that you grew up in or people that you've heard being unwelcoming
Yeah,
of
I
newcomers?
gotta say, for the town I grew up in specifically and the neighborhood I grew up in, I was very lucky. That was not the case. it was sort of that picturesque neighborhood where everyone was friends, very welcoming, very open door type policy. So I myself did not experience that like specifically, um, but people I went to high school with would tell stories because it was my high school was all these other small towns, and
Mm-hmm.
so they would talk about. I heard people telling stories even about something like they themselves or their family did, like, "Oh, these new people moved in and, like, they're the worst," and the reasons they would give, you're like, "I don't understand why we have an issue," again, with something as simple as putting up a fence or having a
Yeah.
vehicle that maybe people don't like, the reasons that people get upset about in a small town are they vary. They it can be anything,
Yeah.
and I think it's a very much if you are in a neighborhood that is close with each other and you wanna get that mean girl cliquey vibe, it
Yeah.
spirals very quickly.
That is a great call out. So, yeah, I mean, if you live in a small town, if you've experienced this and if you haven't experienced it, maybe be aware that, you're not perpetuating it because I think it comes naturally to be like in a controlled environment like that. A lot of people who like living in small towns like it because of the consistency and, things are the same day to day and all that good stuff. But you know what? You're not the only person that pays to live in the town, and that's really all there is to it. So, yeah, no reason to be unwelcoming of people. It really just only like makes you get upset about things
Mhm.
that aren't worth getting upset about, and even more importantly, are not in your control.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there you go. You're welcome. Next
Don't be
one.
rude.
Oh man, I know this has happened to both of us and not just in small towns, but it is a small town behavior for sure. Getting stuck chatting with someone wherever you go because you can't go somewhere without seeing somebody that you know.
Yes. That is a hard one.
And it's hard because it doesn't necessarily mean I don't want to talk to you, but sometimes you just genuinely don't have time. Have you ever
Yeah.
been just like stuck talking to someone where you don't want to be rude because they just have no awareness of the fact that like they're talking your ear off?
Yeah, and it's with those people specifically, if it's someone you know well enough, you can just call it out and say, "Hey, look, I'm in a hurry. I have to do this." And if you can do that, that's amazing. They're gonna receive it well, you'll move on. But it's like when you get stuck with that person that you know, if you try to address it, you're rude. You're the worst person. And it's like so it's just like what's the balance of,
Yeah.
being perfectly polite, but knowing that and again, the small town gossip is all gonna circle back. And it's like, "Oh, Megan was such a rude person at the store," and it's like, "I wasn't actually, I was shopping and I needed to go home to cook dinner because I was hungry."
Because
You
I have
know?
a
You
life.
can't
Yeah.
win. Yeah, you can't win.
That's another really good call out that is not specifically on our list, but yeah, the gossip, the small town gossip. And like one instance like that can just follow you forever.
Mhm.
A small
Yeah,
town.
and it's whether it's happened to you or you know it's a thing, like, it very much is a thing. So you gotta kind of be aware if, you wanna make sure that you're not the talk of the town.
Yeah, but I'm just thinking like we can correct this. We can all be on the same page with each other by just no be it's self-awareness is what it really is
Mhm.
today. So
Yeah.
if you just say to yourself, like, because you said it. It doesn't happen with like if you and I saw each other at the store, wouldn't happen. But if you
Mhm.
see your brother's teacher's sister who, hasn't seen you in a couple years and she
Yeah.
wants to tell you all about what she's making for Christmas dinner. That's great. Totally happy to talk. I really enjoy having conversation with most people. But if I do not have time for it, or God forbid, like something, maybe you're sick, or like you have a family member at home that's sick that you're getting medicine for, or something, like you just never know what someone is up
Mhm.
to. So, what do you think about this? What if we just, anytime that happens and you want to make sure that you're not alienating someone's time, you're like, "Oh, it's so great to see you. Hey, what are you up to right now? Do you have a couple minutes to chat?" That's just the way it should start out.
That's
Yeah?
all you need. Yeah, that's perfect.
Why not?
I like that solution.
Ugh, I love it. We've fixed yet another small town behavior. Okay, this is a really good one and something that I'm interested to see if you have experienced. having preconceived notions about people based on their family members in small towns.
Oh,
Because, like, everybody knows
100%.
everybody.
Yeah.
Or even, like, people that you
Um,
just kinda run in a circle with. You're like, "Oh, well, she's friends with her, so even though I don't really know her, I don't like her already."
yeah. I mean, this was something that happened to me, like, in high school because I had an older brother.
Right.
So, you have a shared last name, you arrive, "Oh, well, you must be this, this, and this way." And it's like, that's not how it works. And, I mean, luckily, my brother was not, like, a problem child in school or anything, so all of the preconceived notions were good. "Oh, you must be very smart, you must be very into these types of things." So it worked out, I guess, in my favor, but I know myself even as a high schooler, I would meet someone with the same last name and like, "Oh, that must be so and so's cousin or sister." And, you immediately start to think, "Oh, does that mean" and again, in high school, I guarantee you that I assumed someone
Yeah.
must be good or bad based on, that shared last name. But as you grow up, you learn, "Oh, that's not necessarily always true."
I think you just made another really good point there, though, Megan, that we're like, oh, yeah, in retrospect, I can see that I have done that in the past. But now that I am older and wiser, I am not doing these things anymore. I think there's a lot of people, though, that older comes, but the wiser just doesn't necessarily
Never
follow.
catches up.
So it comes back to, yeah, that self-awareness. And ultimately, like, this is the same kind of thing as, like, forming your own opinion about anything. Like, just
Mhm.
because one person that you know has this really strong opinion about something doesn't mean that you can't be open to hearing other opinions, or that, like, they're necessarily right or wrong. Just, like, being an open vessel and, you know, giving everyone the benefit of the doubt, I think, at least at first,
Yeah.
can't really go wrong, and you're gonna be a much happier, more relaxed individual. You have better perspective on that than me because, I mean, my mom was a teacher in the same town that I grew up in, but it was in a different school district, and I was the oldest. So my siblings probably experienced it more than I
Mhm.
did, but I'm sure it even goes, like, there's bigger through lines even than that of, you're like, "Oh, I heard that person's uncle went to jail." So then you think that, you have certain
Yeah.
preconceived notions about them. So
Yeah,
again,
and
just,
just
like, open your mind.
yeah. Just because someone's uncle is bad does not mean that they are bad.
Right, we all have
They
crazy
might
family
be, but
members.
they may not
You know?
be.
It happens. Okay, let's move on to some big city behaviors. This is not
Okay.
necessarily a thing that only happens in a big city, but the story that was shared about this one was specifically in a big city, so that's why I put it in this category.
Alright.
And I think this is something we all need to resolve to get on the same page about. FaceTiming in public should just not happen. Is there ever
No.
a reason you can think of where it needs to happen?
My flat answer is no. I will say there are times I see it or I myself in a pinch have done it, but it's, like, brief. I make sure I turn my volume very, very quiet, and then it's like, "Okay, I'm done, I'm quiet, I'm no longer a nuisance to others." But people who are, like, literally just having a conversation, catching up, or again, I see this one a lot, people talking to their kids on FaceTime, like, their kids are at home,
Yeah.
obviously unsupervised, so they're FaceTiming with them,
Oh,
and,
jeez.
like, scolding them and punishing them, and it's like, that I don't think that's how that's supposed to
No.
go. I mean, I don't have kids, I can't say, but that just feels like that's not the way to do it, but, like I said, I'm guilty of I'm in a store, I see something, I need my friend to see this right now because I need to know if they want me to purchase this item. I could take a
Mm,
picture, but it's like, I don't have time for that. I need
yeah,
to know
just
right
gotcha.
now. But again, if I have my headphones, they will always go in, and if I don't, the volume is very quiet, it's brief, we move on. I will never just be chatting in public on FaceTime.
Yeah, this example, the reason that I put it in big city behaviors was because in this the submission that was given was someone that they would see regularly, like multiple times a week, who would always be FaceTiming on the CTA train,
Oh gosh,
like,
no,
with no headphones in or anything.
no, that's that's not fun.
Absolutely
Yeah,
not.
I mean, just the other day, Derek was talking about, like, somebody at work, like, in a break room would be sitting in there FaceTiming, which, like, that's fine. If you're on break, you're in the break room, but then he would walk in to, like, get a drink of water. Oh, and the person would be like, "Oh, hang on, they're spying on me." And it's like, you're not in a private space, so
Right.
get yourself some headphones. That's the biggest thing. If you can at least control part of the volume, like if the volume is not
Yeah.
coming out of your phone, I'm not saying that fixes all of it because there's still
Yeah, that
exceptions,
is
you know?
that's like the biggest general rule though. Yeah, if you have to
Yeah.
do it, you feel so inclined to do it that it is like the better option. Cause I'm thinking like as you said, like, oh, if I want to know if somebody wants me to buy this or whatever, it is better than like texting them a picture and then like standing there and being in the way and like waiting to get a response or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a little different. But use your common sense, friends. It's just
Yeah.
it's gotta be. I just whenever I've seen it, I'm like, isn't this uncomfortable for you? It's very uncomfortable
Like,
for the rest of
everyone
us.
can hear what you're talking about.
Right. And sometimes they're having very personal conversations.
Yeah. I will say I've heard some things and I've been quite entertained and then later had lengthy conversations with whoever I was with. "What do you think that was about?" But
Yeah.
it's I'm a very noise sensitive person. So in general, like I said, if you can at least just control that there's no sound blasting out of the speaker on your phone, I can probably deal. Headphones,
Yeah.
they're great.
And you're not like having some overly emotional private conversation or something. I
Yeah.
mean, I guess if that's really what you need to have happen, but yeah, generally if you can avoid it, we're all by all means,
Yeah.
please do. Oh, this is one I know we've both experienced plenty of times. Forcing yourself onto a train, being like the subway train in this case, when there is not room for you.
The
Tell me about
worst.
a time when you've experienced this, Megan.
Oh, I mean, commuting in New York for the 8 years that I lived there, I would say probably just about daily this would happen,
Yeah.
because, unfortunately, the world likes to operate at the exact same time, so there are times where it can get very crowded, and yeah, that's just I've been the person who's like, "I've made my way in, I'm where I'm supposed to be, but I can't go further. I'm at the door, there's no more space." So then
Yeah.
to have someone force their way behind you is the worst because then you're being knocked into people. I don't wanna be touching strangers. And, then people are giving you a look like, "Oh, why'd you bump into me?" It's like,
Right.
I did not actually. I was shoved
Right.
because someone decided that they needed to occupy the space that did not exist behind me, and
I
it's just annoying.
Yeah, it's annoying and rude for all the reasons you just said, and I think this is gonna closely relate to some of the driving behaviors that we're gonna talk to because what it comes down to is, like, just allow yourself way more than enough time, and listen, I'm someone who's guilty of, like, it took me too long to learn this. I was late way too many times and stressed about it way too many times, but I think actually what turned it around for me was drive now that I drive in the
Mhm.
city, and I just was not willing to put myself at risk to be any kind of because people just drive so stupidly and crazily that, like,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna be in any kind of a hurry when I'm driving, but same thing when yeah, you just can't be in a position to have to force yourself on a train like that because it's so uncomfortable for so many different reasons.
Mhm.
And the one of the times that it happens here in Chicago the most is I lived off of the red line right by Wrigley Field for years. And so
Okay.
anytime before or after Cubs games, it would just be like, oh my gosh, like they would and then it's even worse because half the people are like totally belligerent and don't even,
Mhm.
they just don't have the same perception of like how on top of each other or how they're throwing their elbow in your eye or whatever. And you're like,
Yeah.
those are the times where I have been the most like up against the wall. Like I can't breathe and I
No,
hate
thank you.
everyone. So just again, like be in a position to give yourself that extra few minutes to wait for the next train to come because once you're shut in there with people, like, you just don't wanna be put in that situation of where you feel all that anger and that rage, like,
Yeah.
energy is a thing, it is very
Mhm.
transferable, and even if I guess if you don't have a certain level of self-awareness, maybe you won't take it with you, but I always take that anger with me off of the train, it's hard to let go.
Yeah. Mhm.
Whew. Okay, last one for big city behaviors.
Alright.
If you live in the city you can't be annoyed by tourists being in touristy areas. Is that fair?
That's completely fair.
I'm
I
not
I
talking
will
about like, you're on a side street or you're trying to get into your apartment, which is like blocks away from even the closest train or anything. I'm talking about
Mhm.
like you're in the middle of Times Square and there's people taking pictures and you're like, ugh, what idiots.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, you can internally be completely annoyed, especially if you are trying to go somewhere. Like, I know I had been, like, going trying to get to a show. The show starts in 10 minutes. I'm very close, but, like, I do have a purpose to that's the thing. It's purpose-driven walking. As someone who lived in the city, typically, if I was out and about, I had a purpose. I had drive for where I needed to go. I wasn't necessarily in a hurry, rushed, whatever, but, like, I walk with a purpose. And so when you enter those tourist bubbles and you get the people who are slower, gawking, stopping, it can be hard. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
denying that it's frustrating because it can be, but I would never have ever said anything out loud to a tourist in those spaces because I
Right.
get it. I live in the most traveled to destination in the world. Yeah, it's gonna be crowded, especially Christmas time in Midtown. Ooh,
Yeah.
that was a whole different animal. But yeah, you can't express that anger to those people because they're on vacation. Like they're happy to be there and, just again, allow yourself more time to go where you're going. Avoid those areas when you can. Just be patient, be polite.
Right. You have to know what you're subjecting yourself to. That's the
Yeah.
thing. Some things
It's
we just
not a
have to.
surprise. Yeah.
Right. And why get upset over, again, something that's just like not in your control and they are where they're supposed to be. Right.
Mhm.
So I guess you probably have experienced this because now you live in Orlando and you actually worked at Disney for a time. So you know the park super well. You've been there a ton.
Mhm.
Still go from time to time. And you probably experienced that like at the parks too, where you're like, oh, there's tons of people who are just here for the first time. But like, I know
Yeah.
exactly what I want to go do. Same kind of thing. Like you can't just be like, out of my way, toddlers.
Yeah,
Megan's back.
exactly. And that's the thing, like, even now, like, I was just at the park, the other night, and it was very, very crowded. Brendan Fraser was there for the holiday candlelight processional, and
Nice.
he's much more famous than I realized. I know he's famous, but he was very, very popular, and that's why people were there. And I was definitely getting frustrated by the lack of movement I had to get around. I was hungry, I was there to eat. And so, yes, I sent texts to my friends when I sat down at a table to be like, "Oh my gosh, it's so crowded. Everyone's here for Brendan Fraser. Like, that's great, but well, it is hard to walk around." But did I say a word to any single person out loud who was in my way or was, blocking my path? Absolutely not. I kept it inside, moved on. I had a margarita real quick when I got in that park.
There you go.
Everything was
Yeah.
fine.
Find a way to deal because, yeah,
Exactly.
I think, yeah, there's definitely scenarios where those kinds of things are happening, like touristy things are happening, maybe in a not so touristy area. And you're like, okay, like, I guess by the other end of the same token, like people, tourists are people who just are not from where they're at need to be aware that
Mhm.
there are people that live here and people that are trying to live their day-to-day lives. But when you're in those specific areas, like again, this was part of a story that was submitted of someone who was in Times Square that like who was like a 70-year-old woman who got like pushed over by someone
Oh
who
my
said that they were
gosh.
to work. So yeah, I mean, like that's just
That's
terrible.
yeah, that's not acceptable.
Speaking of other things that are not acceptable, let's talk about some roommate and neighbor behaviors because I think we could probably do a whole series of episodes
Yes.
on these things. Uh, you and we were roommates for a number of years and we always had a third roommate. And
Mhm.
I'm just going to say it now. I really don't care if any of them are listening. The third roommate was always the problem until we found Sam. Shout out Sam. She was great and magical. And maybe the mistake that we made is they were all men before. I don't know. But we had a lot of the same problems and a lot of unique and crazy, like, well, who would have thought that would happen? And I think for
Yeah.
anyone who's ever had a roommate, you can probably relate to some extent. But one of the ones that I know we both experienced a lot of frustration with was this first one. And that is helping yourself to food, drink, or anything really that is not yours, that belongs to one of your roommates.
Yeah,
You have some
that
experience
is
with this, Megan?
oh, absolutely. I mean, I feel like almost every roommate, again, you kind of realize patterns and you see how things are, but that was a consistent problem, like, in college even.
Mm,
And, like, in college, I feel like there is a much more, like, immediate friendship that happens because you are all choosing to be, like, at the school. It's very exciting. It's your first time
yeah.
away from home. But if you're lucky, you establish those boundaries and you figure out what works for everybody. And I guess maybe when you are paying to live with people, it's just approached not in the same way. And maybe that's where our mistake was. But you also think as an adult, you don't have to set certain rules. There's certain things that shouldn't have to be said. If I purchase with my own money food for me to eat, that is not your food in any way, shape, or form. And
I'm not your
just because
mother.
it's in
I
a
didn't
shared
buy it for you.
refrigerator, yeah, just because it's in a shared space does not mean that item is yours. Like, that's a rough one.
Yeah. One of a specific memory, I guess, that I'll share is happened just in the first 2 weeks of us living in New York City, maybe 3 weeks of us living in New York City, because we moved at the very beginning of September, and Megan's birthday is September 13th. So she was celebrating her birthday after just us being very new to New York City. And we lived in Astoria, which has all these wonderful, cute little bakeries and a very strong Greek culture. And so we lived by this really cute Greek bakery that I think we found it like the first day that we lived there. But as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh man, I'm going to get Megan a birthday cake from here. It'll be like a great, first little special thing for her birthday. And I think it was an ice cream cake that we got
I think it was.
for your birthday. And we shared a piece with our third roommate. But yeah, we each had a piece that night. And then I think less than 48 hours later, the rest of the cake, probably an additional like 8 pieces or so, was gone.
It's a big cake.
Yeah. And neither one of us had any more of it. And neither one of us heard a word from our third roommate about, if they were welcome to Megan's birthday cake. So it was kind of like a double whammy. Like I bought it, but it was for her.
Yeah.
Even if I had
Yeah.
eaten it, it would have been shitty, but it was way shittier because
Well, and as someone who like I get that not everyone in the world is food driven. I've learned, which is like shocking to me.
yeah,
I like wake up and I can't wait to find out what I'm going to eat for breakfast. Like Derek cooks breakfast for us every day and I like wake up and I can't wait to see like what he's making in the kitchen. I live to eat. Like it's the best part of the day. And so I've always been very attached. Like if I have a leftover in the fridge, oh, I
yeah,
can't wait to eat that leftover. Like I know what I have. And so when someone takes that away and you don't know, that's the worst. Like, my brother would do that growing up, like and that was
I
a
was
brother, which,
just
like, a little different,
I
but
was
it still
just thinking about
sucks.
that. Yes.
Yeah,
My brother, my brother was younger, but they go through that same phase where like, I swear my brother's still in it where he is just a garbage disposal and he can eat anything and be like this long, tall string bean. But yeah, like there were so many times where I was like, I had that thing I was really looking forward to and Jacob ate it. So shout out
yeah,
Jake. Love you, but you ate a lot of my food. But I agree. It's not as bad as when you're an adult human being. Because the other big thing is a lot of this happened when we were 22, 23, 24 years old, living in New York City, like trying to just make above minimum wage, pay out the
mhm,
ass in rent. And then, yeah, the money that we're spending, it's not like we had an extra, amount of cash to even throw towards this stuff day to day. And if you did buy some, especially if it was like a special bottle of booze or something, like
mhm,
I planned for that. And you were
yeah,
not invited to help yourself.
yeah, that's not
So
good.
yeah, I agree. I'm very like food and beverage focused as well. So that's a big like crime against humanity for me.
Yeah, and
And if
maybe
people
that's
are
our
doing
thing, like,
this,
maybe people need to tell us, are we just so obsessed with food, so that's why
yeah,
it's a
is it
problem?
us?
Or I
But
don't think it is though.
it would be the same thing as like if you had like a really nice shampoo that you used for yourself and your roommate just constantly helped themselves to using your
Mm,
nice hair care or
yeah,
body products or whatever, anything. Like
yeah,
it's your
it's
money, it's your
precedent.
thing.
Mhm,
It's not the same as like even living with a significant other like we do now. Like even that is my husband eats my ice cream and
oh, all the
that
time I'll tell Derek, "I have this leftover in here, do not eat this." But that's the thing, at least I feel very comfortable
yes.
establishing these I don't
Yes,
want to
you
say
don't
the
feel like you
rules,
should have
but
to say that. You don't feel like you should have
yeah,
to say that to an adult roommate. Yeah, no.
because
Like
then
you shouldn't
yeah,
have to
because 'cause you're not
text like,
there
"Don't eat my
to
yogurt."
yeah, you're not there to parent them, whatever, yeah, that's
Exactly.
it's the precedent really, like you said, it's you've spent your money, and especially as a young adult, it's very hard earned and very, there's not a lot of it. So
Yeah.
everything that you've purchased, you have because it's 2 weeks until you get paid again, and you're not going to the store before the next paycheck.
Yeah, I
So,
just feel like everyone I've ever lived with other than you has had problems being respectful of that, and I don't get it. And I kid with Daniel, I don't really get that mad when you eat my ice cream. I just really like to give him shit about it because the way that if we each get a pint of ice cream, like he'll eat the
mhm,
whole pint, I'll eat like a quarter of it because I'm just not like a super sweet person, so I only want a little bit of something sweet at a time. And then, 2 days later I'll go back to have another quarter of it and
it's
it's
gone.
gone and he's like, "Well, it was in there for days."
And it's gonna go bad in the freezer?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I was
Oh,
just really concerned it would go to waste.
I've been in
Yeah,
your house
so
when this has come up, so this is very real.
yeah. It's I think you were here when the pumpkin cheesecake ice cream went missing,
Yes,
perhaps.
that
That
was
was
the
that was
one.
very upsetting. That was a limited edition. Yeah, couldn't take
That
that
hurt.
one back. But yes, it's not quite the same. I guess family members, like it's still tricky. You can have those conversations with them. But if you are an adult human being living with another adult human being who you are not related to or in a romantic relationship with, perhaps think about, being as respectful as possible of their space and their things. And
Mhm,
one of our roommates, remember I had in my bedroom, I had a full mirror, a full length mirror. And I
mm,
remember he would just walk in because there was no other full length mirror in the house. He didn't have one in his room. I
mhm.
bought it for like $5 or something down the street. But no, he couldn't get himself one. He would walk into my room while I was sleeping to look in the mirror.
It's so horrible.
Like,
Like,
what on earth? Again, tell me if I'm off base here, but I just think that's something that is common sense.
no. Yeah, I think it's common sense, and again, in a roommate type scenario, you have your shared spaces, and then you have your spaces that are yours, and there shouldn't have to be rules, discussions, whatever. A space that is yours is yours. No one else should be in there without you being aware, without them asking, being there with you at the same time, and then the shared space is shared, so don't take it over. Don't just don't be a dick.
Yeah,
And
actually,
that's like what a lot of this comes down to.
have you
Just
seen
don't be a dick.
there's this meme that I've shared like so many times over the years, and it's like the Buddha statue, and it's just
Mhm.
Buddha like
Layla,
sitting
come here.
meditating or something, and it says, "Don't be a dick," Buddha. I'm like, that's exactly it.
Yeah, Layla wanted to say hi.
Hi, pretty girl. Producer
Nico's
Layla.
giving
See,
me a
I have
guy. I'm
producer
not
June,
happy.
who is producer June is my, producer of this podcast. She works very hard. She lays next to me while I record.
Very
So
important.
Layla just wanted to make sure that she was doing her part. I really
Yeah,
appreciate that.
good girl. I appreciate you, Layla.
She's a good roommate.
Yeah,
She
she
would
knows
know
what's up.
anything about any of this. Okay, this is another one that, like, I'm gonna say I was guilty of this once in my life, but it was on accident. But I'm interested to hear if this is something you've dealt with. Roommates or even neighbors, I can see this going both way, being visibly in states of undress. So like whether they're,
Ooh,
openly wearing a robe or like just walking around their house naked and like very, should be well aware that maybe neighbors
yeah.
could see things they don't want to see. And likewise with roommates, like we were just talking about shared spaces, like, I guess you do you if you're comfortable with something, but you got to be respectful, I think, to a certain extent, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, and the house we live in, we are very close to houses on either sides of
Yeah.
us. If the windows are open, you can 100% see everything. So I'm always very aware of, making sure curtains are closed and you because like first of all, I maybe people are more confident in themselves, but I'd be embarrassed if I knew
Yes.
that everyone's just staring at me walking around, but also it's like I don't do that. So that's my solution. But yeah, it's people don't want to be like hanging out on their couch and like, oh look, the neighbor's naked. Like
Right.
we're not the characters in Friends. No one is amused by ugly naked guy. That is
Yes.
not a thing.
Okay. That's a great reference. But you're right. They were like a little too amused by that. Whereas like Okay, you probably will remember this once I start telling the story. I remember this was in the second apartment that we lived in New York, so we'd
Uh-huh.
at least lived there for a little bit, but I was home alone. I don't know if you were like out of town or whatever, but I knew I was going to be home alone for like this extended period of time. And for whatever reason, like I had just gotten out of the shower, I think, because I remember I had my like hair towel on and I think I just had my underwear on and literally like nothing else, like just underwear. I was totally topless and I was like vacuuming. And I looked
I
across
remember
into
this
like the
story.
courtyard across and I could see the people in the kitchen could see me. Never again, Megan, never
Never
again.
again.
I was like, "Welcome to New York.
Yep.
You need to put on some clothes
Yeah, there are
if
neighbors
you are
everywhere.
not in the bathroom or your bedroom." Yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah, that's just, again, a self-awareness thing. So,
self-awareness.
luckily, it only had happened to me once to be very aware of it, and hopefully for the
You
general
learn
public,
quick.
now that we've brought their attention to it, they'll be right on par.
All right.
Oh, this is something that I have some personal experience with actually pretty recently. Have you ever had neighbors who like call the cops on the same neighbor, like for little or no reason?
I don't think so.
That's good.
I don't now, and like I said, growing up, that was not the vibe. And in New York, I think there were times I myself was close to calling the cops on a neighbor situation. Usually if I was concerned for someone's safety and I didn't feel comfortable going myself to investigate, not my job to do that. That's the cat's auto feeder. She's going off.
They're
Here
very
you go,
festive
go.
tonight. They're
Yeah,
celebrating with us.
there you go. You can eat.
But no, that's a good point. There are sometimes very warranted reasons,
Mhm.
to do so. But in my most recent example, I mean, there's actually in the neighborhood that I'm in now, there's been a couple different neighbors that there were these two neighbors that live next door, and they just like really did not see eye to eye on anything, and neither one of them was doing something actually wrong, especially considering
Mhm.
they own their home and their property and like they can kind of do, what they want. They can play music at least. I don't even know what they were calling each other on, to be honest, but it was like that was all the neighborhood gossip was like these two houses were just constantly calling the cops on each
Oh.
other and it was always for no reason at all.
No, and that's just I don't know, that to me is just immature behavior because
Exactly. Like
the
have an adult
reality
conversation.
yeah, and the reality is, like, you calling 911 for something and asking a police officer to come investigate a situation that is not worthy of their time, you could be blocking an actual important call that's coming in.
Nailed it.
So let's call the police for things we really need them for, and,
Right.
let's deal with other stuff on our own because that's just stupid.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Be
I've also
better.
the other situation that I've had is where again, like this is back to the preconceived notions kind of thing
Mhm.
of like if depending on what area of the world you're in. I mean, I'm in Chicago, which is a very like diverse area, but there are still people who have certain opinions of like the way you look and your ethnicity and whatever. Like they just develop a certain perception about you. And for that reason alone, they will be like, this neighbor must be up to no good because
Yeah,
because they are personally uncomfortable of the
yeah,
unknown because this neighbor like looks different than they do. And that
yeah,
kind of stuff, like I have absolutely no tolerance for.
mm-mm.
Very uncool. Like check yourself,
Yeah, that is not cool at all.
that's a big like I like to say like these are people being stupid, not necessarily stupid people, but that might be like a
Mhm.
stupid people thing. Like,
Yeah, that
come on.
might be.
Yeah. Okay, last roommate one that we'll talk about here, and this kind of goes into the food and drink thing we touched on a little bit, but hogging the bathroom or any shared space. I know
Yeah.
you've experienced it alongside with me of where like we would have like a schedule of, I'm going to get up at this time and take a shower tomorrow because I have to be at work at this time. Does that work for you? We'd set times.
Mhm.
And then it was like we just that conversation never even happened.
Yeah. That is a tough one, especially being in a space where if there truly is one bathroom, one toilet, like, because that was the thing, like,
Yeah.
when, Derek and I were looking at places to live together, I said, "I'm flexible on the bathroom as far as, like, 2 bathrooms, 1.5 bathrooms." I was like, "I do not go below 1.5.
Yes.
There must be 2 toilets in this house."
Yes.
Not just for, like, when the 2 of us are here all the time, but, like, should we have a guest over? Like,
Right.
I just to 1 toilet, whoever invented these spaces, It's so stupid. That should not be how it is ever.
Yeah, so
Um,
ideally, yeah, just have more than
yeah.
one bathroom. But if you can't, and in New York City apartments, it's very
Mhm.
few and far between. In fact, the bathroom that we shared was like half the size of every other bathroom I've ever had. So, but it was
Yeah.
one toilet,
It
one
was a
tub,
very small bathroom.
shower. Yeah, and you just gotta again, we all work together. We all pay the same to live here, and you just gotta be considerate.
Yeah. That's a tough one.
So, if you this is hard because as we're talking about this, I'm like, well, I hope we're getting to people. We're doing important work here. We're changing the world for the better. But the people who do these things are like not realizing a lot of the time.
Yeah,
So that's the tricky part. But
that
and
is the
speaking
tricky part.
of people who are unaware of stupid things they're doing, let's talk about some travel behaviors because we
Ooh,
see
all
all
right.
kinds of crazy things. But again, keeping them pretty generic from the submissions that we got. You have been on plenty of airplanes, even a lot recently. So I know the person who stands up at the exact moment that the plane gets to the gate and is like, "Me, I'm first. I'm priority to get off the plane." How do you
Yeah,
deal with that?
that's well, and that one is tough. Like, if you're on the aisle, I at least can accept it because you want to stand and you're not really in anyone's way. But when the person in the window seat is also trying to get up and get out, I'm like, where do you think you are going? Airplane behavior is just it's again that could probably be a whole episode.
Yes,
It's hard. People get I think they get anxious when they
sure.
travel, and then they are not operating at a normal level. So
Yeah.
the people who crowd the gate when like they've called group one and you're group nine, why are you standing at the
Yes.
front of the line? What are you doing?
Right.
You
I know
have an
how busy
assigned
you
seat on this plane. It's not leaving without you. You're
are. Right.
here. You're going to make it on. So yeah, that's a tough one. The way I do on planes is I just try to lead by example. So we land, I unbuckle my seatbelt, and I sit there, and I patiently wait until they get to wherever I'm sitting. But yeah,
That's all
that's a
you can
tough
do.
one. Yeah,
Yeah, I think another good call out there. You just need to like take some deep breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth, and again, just you're gonna get where you're going,
yeah,
but there is a process to everything, and it's part of the process is waiting.
mhm,
So
yeah,
kind of be
it is.
ready for
And if you want to be that first person off the plane, you better bump yourself up to first class. Like you pay for it, you can sit right up front. You
it. Yeah,
know,
there you
they'll
go.
park, you'll fly right off. But otherwise, just hang out. It's gonna be fine.
We're all in it together, totally.
Yeah.
Okay, this one I'm interested to see if you have maybe experienced since I have just been to the UK where they not speak English, so I haven't necessarily. I guess I still have experienced this a little bit, just like even cultural differences wise. But this submission was about not attempting to communicate locally or like expecting everyone to speak English or be able to
Mm,
cater to you. So like you just
yeah.
show up in the middle of nowhere in Germany and are like, why don't you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Not
That's
great.
no, that's unacceptable. You have to, at a minimum, learn how to introduce yourself in that language and ask some baseline questions, even if one of those questions is, "Do you speak English?"
Yeah.
But you have to be able to say that in their language, and that's again, that's common courtesy, um, and not, acting like just because you speak English, you're better than everyone. Because spoiler alert, we're all the same. Nobody's better. So, be a little humble, and take that time, put in the effort to ask those questions of, how, you know, do you speak English? Where's the bathroom? Just some baseline things because they're gonna see that you're trying. And I
Yes.
went to Paris a few times, and the French can be quite, you know, annoyed with Americans very easily. Like, and that's not a joke. That's a very real thing.
Mhm.
So I was kind of nervous, and so my friend and I made a very good point to be able to say certain things. And everywhere we went, the person could speak English to us and was happy to do so. And there were like two places where the person 100% only knew French. They went and found someone for us who could speak English. And it's like, great,
Yeah.
thank you so much. And, you move on. But, you learn to charade some things, you point at what you want, you smile, you do your best, but you gotta learn a baseline. You got to at
Yeah.
least try just a little bit.
Right. Or at the very least, do not be mad when someone doesn't operate
Yeah.
exactly the way that you're used to, because whether it's language or otherwise, because I've even experienced that in New York where like whether it's accents or like people just, different parts of our country, people just talk differently. The vernacular is
Mhm.
different. The speed in which they speak is different. And sometimes like I even had people who were like visiting me that were with me that were like, what the, I can't understand what you're saying. And it's like, just listen. Like you have to just be in the
Yeah.
moment and like understand that like you live in a very different world than they do, but we're
Mhm.
all on the same planet sharing a human experience and they're not trying to upset you.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think just that sense of entitlement seems
Yeah.
to,
It's no
Americans
good.
get a bad rap sometimes for a reason. So
Yeah.
just you make a great
Let's
point
work
of
on
saying
that
like,
together.
yeah, even if you're trying, they have a lot
Mhm.
of respect for that, I think, regardless of where you go or what kind of situation you would be in. So
Yeah, you're
good call
showing
there.
that you're just not assuming that anyone's gonna cater to you.
Yeah,
You're doing your best.
good call. Glad we fixed that one. Check it off the list.
Check. Next.
Okay, last travel behavior here. Oh, we kind of already talked about this in our big city behaviors because we talked about both sides of it, but a lack of awareness of surroundings when taking pictures or like taking in the sights. And this can be tricky because it's very exciting and it can be very overwhelming. But at the same time, like there's usually designated areas where you can stand. Where like I went to this is like a good public event call out, I guess, because I went to like a light show at the Arboretum last night, and everyone is following the same path to walk
Mm.
through the Arboretum. You follow the path that like takes you through the different areas of the light show. But for certain things, they're like timed to music and you want to stand there and watch it. So they had like these designated areas of like step back and watch it here if you want to stand and watch. So it just made me think like, man, this should exist in like, outside of the
Yeah.
Empire State Building of where you can get the perfect picture of the Empire State Building. Stand
Right.
here and
Stand here. This is
get the
this
hell out
is
of
the
the
spot. Yeah, I mean, we had something similar here for Halloween that we went to. And we were on this pretty wide walking path, not a huge group of us, like we are a small group. And we were on the side and we had stopped to take a picture of something that was happening, with a light or some kind of cool effect. And the people behind us who were walking too close to us to begin with, number one. And that's another problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're like, oh, just stop in the middle, take a picture. And it's like, that's what this is. This is a thing for Instagram. You come, you
Plenty
take
of
your
room. Yeah.
pictures. And again, plenty of room, huge path. We're way to the side. Give us a little more space between us, number one. And just walk around and be quiet. Like if you don't want to take a picture, you don't have to. But
Right. Good
that's
for you.
what this is for.
Take
This is for photos.
Yeah, so on both of this lack of awareness of surroundings, but also like not being pissed at tourists, it's kind of both ends of the same thing of just
Yeah.
like be aware of the situation that you're in and be respectful of everyone and like you be good. Just like common
Yeah.
sense, you know?
You don't have to pick a fight with someone just because you feel like it. Like it's not
Yeah,
fun.
maybe check yourself. Think about where that anger is coming from because
Yeah.
it's probably not actually at the person who's taking the picture in front of you.
They're probably hungry because they live with a roommate who ate all of their food.
This is why we're
This
doing
all
this,
is a
Megan.
cycle. This is all it all is
And
connected.
it is a systemic problem and of people being stupid and we are better and they can be better.
Yeah.
And that's why we're here.
It takes one person to do the positive change and then the domino effect from
Trickle
there.
down effect.
Wow.
Nailed
We're
it.
gonna run for president. This is happening.
Clark Bird 2024. Just
It's
kidding. Everything's
happening.
spam. Do not elect me. I will not
Please,
accept it.
please do not.
Raja and Miko, our cats can run because honestly,
Yeah. Come here, Meek.
they are just as qualified as anyone at this point. Anyway, let's talk about some driving behaviors here
Okay.
real
Oh,
quick. These are surely inarguable.
this is gonna
The
be rough.
first one is probably the thing that I experience the most, at least driving in Chicago, that makes me insane, and that is following too close to the car in front of you. So if you're like tailing someone or like riding their
Yeah.
ass because I guess you think they're not going fast enough.
Well, I think in most places, I don't know this for a fact, so I'm not going to try to say I know this, but I'm pretty sure most places tailgating is completely illegal. You are not supposed to do it,
Really, like
by
you
the
could get
law.
ticketed for it.
I think so.
I will have to look that up because there are a lot of people that should be getting tickets here because yeah, you're supposed to, I do know, I remember the rules of the road. You're supposed to follow a car's length behind, which is like very substantial. So if you didn't know, we're here to tell you car's length
Yeah. Car's
behind.
length is definitely, at least, again, maybe if it's not the law, that's definitely how it should be, just as common courtesy. But yeah, look up where you live because I mean, driving is different. The laws are wide,
Yes.
they vary drastically. But that's just being so close to someone, you are just asking to be involved in an accident.
Yes,
What if
exactly.
someone jumps out in front of the car you're following? They have to slam on their brakes. You have no room for error.
Right. And that's the thing is I always want to like you have the urge to like brake check, but I would never dare to do it because they're literally gonna run into me.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about like even if they're not going the speed limit, it's not okay. Like you wait until you can safely pass them. But
Mhm.
usually I'm going like 5 over, sometimes 10
Mhm.
over, and this happens. And you're like,
Yeah.
again, it goes back to like leave earlier. Give
Yeah,
yourself
give
time. And I'm
yourself some
sorry if you
time.
didn't give yourself the time, you're going to get there late, but it's better to get there safe.
Mhm.
And for
Agreed.
God's sake, please try to keep
Yeah,
my car
that's a
insurance
rough one.
premiums down because I'm paying so much for car insurance in the city of Chicago
Oh,
because of where I'm at, right?
yeah.
And it's
I
not a
can
matter
only
of like
imagine.
if you're going to get in an accident, it's a matter of when because people just tell you all the time. But this is another reason why you might get into an accident because a lot of people don't use their turn signal.
Oh, that one makes me there's situations within that one that make it worse. So, a lot of times if you're at a stoplight and everyone has like you have the green, people opposite you have the green, and you're waiting your turn to go left because it's not a blocked arrow. You could turn, yielding to traffic. And then the person who was coming at you, they also turn.
Yes.
And it's like, well, if you had your signal on, I could have gone. Granted,
None.
it's like 3 seconds earlier, but it makes me crazy. It
Yeah.
makes me crazier when they are already turning and then they add their turn signal. I'm like, thank you for the afterthought there.
Like, yeah, did you
Just don't
really
do it.
forget? Like, right.
Like, but that one's rough. It's rough too, if you're in any kind of road where people could be turning off, like, turning right onto a side street,
Oh,
and
yeah,
they're
and they're gonna
braking, they're
slow
braking, they're
down.
braking, and you're like, "Why are we slowing down? What's happening?" And then they turn, and it's like, "Oh, well, I would have liked to know that because it just makes me less cautious as to why. Why are we
Yeah.
slowing down? What is happening?"
Woulda helped if I
Yeah,
just knew. Yeah,
because when
it's
I
just
see
that
someone veering lanes and there's no signal, I get very nervous, and then it's like, "Oh, they just
absolutely.
changed lanes." So I'm like, "Are you okay? Do you know what's happening?" It's like,
Yeah,
"Yeah, they
it's there
do.
for
They
a
do
reason.
know."
Again, it's the law, so there's a reason. I'm like
When a police
a really
officer doesn't
annoying.
use their signal,
Oh,
I
yes, when
get
that's actually a really good call out because police officers, they do that where they'll speed around you and they don't have their lights on, they don't have anywhere to go, but, like, they're above the law. Yeah, no,
yeah, and then they
that's
turn and there's no signal. I'm
okay.
like, "Ooh, nice signal, officer." That's the
Yes.
only time I, like, get, like, kinda some sass because, like, again, police are great, they're here to help us. But when they
They
don't use
pull
their
stuff like
signals,
that,
it
it's like that's what
really makes me
gives
mad.
you a bad name. Don't give people, yeah, an
Yeah.
excuse to feel
Be
that
an
way.
example, be a good example, use your signals.
Yes. We've talked multiple times about being a good example. So if you are listening and you're like, none of these apply to me, I know I'm better. I'm not on the stupid side here. Keep doing
Please
you because
continue. Yeah.
you setting the example is equally meaningful. I'm like annoying. I think I use my turn signal to like a fault. Like I even use it if I'm like turning into a parking space. Like I'm just really neurotic
Oh,
about it.
I use it to turn into a parking space frequently in, like, a busy shopping center because
Yeah,
I need people to know, like, what I'm doing, and so no one's gonna try to get around me, and then, there's an
exactly.
accident in the parking lot. Like, we don't
Yeah.
need
I'm just like everybody sees me, right? And speaking of seeing you,
that.
let's talk about people who don't use their headlights when it's dark and or in bad weather. When
Oh,
again, this is very much the law
the
to have your
worst.
headlights on, but I see it like way too often. You texted me about this last night because you were
Mhm.
in a very dangerous scenario last night with it, yeah?
Yeah. Yeah, we had horrible weather coming through Florida. It was, like, basically a small hurricane that happened all day, all night, and at first I thought this vehicle didn't have their headlights on, and then it turns out it was a very old car that had very dim headlights, so still a safety issue that they should work on, but it sparked that memory of, "Oh, yeah, when vehicles don't use their headlights," and it happens all the time, and it's almost always like a black car, a dark gray car that literally is invisible otherwise.
Yeah.
And when it's these
Scary.
new fancy cars like the BMWs and Mercedes and, like, you can tell it's definitely a new car and it's not on, I'm like, "You chose to turn off a
Right.
feature that just automatically helps you and others. Why
Right.
did you do that? Why'd you turn off auto
Yeah,
lights?
you
Just
don't
let
even
it
have
be
to think
auto."
about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it just does it.
That's
My
so true.
car's not
Most
even
cars
that
on the
new,
road
and it's auto.
Yep, most cars on the road these days are. And even when I mean, my first car and yours too, because we drove the same make and model of car. Yours was just like a year or two, a few years older or newer than mine was. But
Mhm.
yours probably, your Sunfire, you had to manually turn on the lights, right?
I think so. It's been
I
a minute.
definitely did, but I still never forgot to freaking turn them on.
Well, because
Like,
also, can't you not see? Like, I feel like when my headlights are off,
right.
I can't see.
Especially, yeah. I mean, yeah. No, I know sometimes it can be hard to see if you're like driving in the city or whatever that you don't have them on, but it should literally just be like the same way you put your seatbelt on, you turn the lights on. And at this point, like not many people are even worried about that. But I agree. As soon as you text me about that, I was like, I see this far too often for the fact that
Mhm.
most cars, yeah, they automatically turn them on unless you tell them not to. And
Which why
2,
would
it's
you?
just, like, incredibly unsafe, and it instantly makes me feel like they're sketchy and, like, up to something, and, like, I don't know
Mhm.
what, but it just makes me instantly so
Yeah, it's a rough one.
okay, so, like, be a courteous, self-aware driver. Again, I'm, like, getting a little worked up, a little pink in the face
I
about this
know.
one, but
The
let's
driving
talk
one's hard.
about our last handful of general behaviors
Okay.
here. This one is a big one, being rude to customer service workers. You and I have
Ooh.
both been customer service workers more often than not in our
Mhm.
professional lives, and so we definitely kind of have a spot of understanding for that, but yeah, I mean, that's, like, one of the most attractive or unattractive things in the world to me would be,
Mhm.
like, I was interviewing someone once, and I think I asked her, like, what would be I think it was Katie, Katie Hollinsworth, who you know,
Yes.
and I asked her,
Mhm.
like, what would be, like, a non-negotiable, if you were on a date, like, that you would just be like you might even excuse yourself early from the date, definitely no second date, and she said, "Being rude to customer service workers."
Oh,
I
100%.
just couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Well, because here's the thing, and maybe we see it a little different because we have been in those positions, but these people probably don't want to be working at this establishment. At least not long term. Maybe for now they're happy, but, like, this is not their dream job. This is not
Right.
their long-term goal. So give them a little kindness and courtesy, while they're here bettering themselves for, whatever they're doing next. And just don't be rude because if you don't like whatever rule they are trying to enforce or, whatever reason you're upset with them, they probably did not choose to
Yeah,
enforce whatever
they
this
have
thing
no
is.
say. Yes,
Yeah, like,
exactly.
this is their job, and they are being told by someone else or multiple someone else's that this is how this is,
Yes.
and, like,
So
just
that's
deal with it.
actually this is something really funny that I have talked about a number of times is so for the last few years that I worked in customer service, I was like the regional manager of multiple locations. So I was the only person on the ground that was in the state that was like
Mhm,
really in charge of things and making a lot of the rules and processes and procedures that people were following. But it would drive me nuts because people would be so rude to my employees and asked to, demand to talk to a manager. And then as soon as they would talk to me, they would like completely change their tone just because they were talking to someone who I don't know if they thought, I could actually, but I was like, no, actually, they're doing that because I told them to. And they
yeah,
still would be a nicer to me than them.
mhm,
So it's just like, again, take your anger out on something else, like,
mhm, and
go do some
that
axe
goes
throwing or something. But
yeah, that all goes back to that same way of, like, don't assume that you are better than anyone else.
yeah,
And that always feels like when you see those specific examples, that feels very much like "Oh, well, this person is a lowly nobody,
yeah,
so I'll be
yeah.
rude to them." Well, no, that's not how that should go
Yeah, or I think a
at
lot of
all.
times it happens too if people feel like they have to be rude to get what they want. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, like that does sometimes I feel like, because I'm someone who, like, even when there is something like I should get upset about, when I was adding this to our outline, it made me think about that episode of Will and Grace where they're at the restaurant with a really bad server, and he's like legitimately terrible. He's like, he got all their orders wrong. He's like spilling shit all over them. Like, it's a mess. And Grace is like, no, you know what? I'm going to, like, this is ridiculous. This is supposed to be your nice birthday dinner. Like, we're paying a lot for this and it's a big special thing for us. I'm going to say something. Like, even in those kinds of scenarios, like, I feel terrible. It like wrecks me inside, but I'm like, sometimes, you know, you have to, and again, I'm not, because I don't need to know. I'm sure there's some other reason. It has nothing to do with me why they're acting that way, or whatever circumstance that I am complaining about might have nothing to do with the person that I actually get to talk to about it. But still, like, I think there's a way that you can get your point across and communicate effectively and not be mean. And it takes one person, one domino to set the standard and let the rest of them fall into line. So we don't have to be mean to get things.
Kindness can go so far and can get you so far.
I would much rather help. I would be much more willing to help someone like on the customer service end if they were kind to me.
Oh, absolutely.
And otherwise I'd be like, no, them's the rules. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, like when I worked at Disney, if I had someone come up and they're immediately like, I'm going to make your day horrible, because people would say that, I immediately was like mentally shut down. I don't care about you anymore, and I will let you babble, and then I'll go find a manager to talk to you, because no way. And people do that, and it's like that was your goal. And again, at Disney,
oh my gosh,
this is supposed to be like a happy, magical place.
Right. Oh, geez. Yeah. You're like, listen, I don't know what your problem is, but it is not also going to be my problem. So
it will not be mine. No, I will stand here and then I will get someone else to deal with you, because no.
I will say, because I mentioned like what you just said was, you defer it to someone else. And a lot of times then, like, I mean, if they are the same way to them, whatever, at least at that point, like, I always felt like as upper management, like, if someone speaks to you that way, like, do not hesitate to defer to me, because you do not get paid nearly enough to be spoken to that way. No one does, to be fair.
Absolutely not.
But I, simply, so if you are, overseeing people who have these kind of negative interactions, I would say give them the benefit of the doubt and be willing to just have their back, because it goes a long way. And now working for a company that like very much has that culture, it's a completely different experience. So
yeah.
Whew.
Kindness.
Okay, this is an interesting one. The next one on our list, but you, I think, have had some experience seeing this, even in the theme parks, you said, and that is people who have fake service dogs.
This one is just, I will never, ever understand this one. Because I don't know, my whole life I had pets, and you go to do something and the pets don't come with you. They stay at home.
Right.
They go to a neighbor's, a relative's, doggy daycare. So I just don't understand that level of attachment that people have.
Yes.
And then again, to literally fake whatever your need for their service is, when it's so obvious, is
well, in the same way that you were talking about making an unnecessary call to authorities, it's the same thing. It like diminishes people who actually do have them for legitimate reasons, and it's just very like respectful to them more than anything.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just weird. You and I are both crazy cat people. Like, I live and die for my animals, but I have no desire to like take them into a theme park or like they don't want that either. It stresses the animal
exactly.
out too.
Yeah, what are they going to do? That's a rough one, because again, you legally can't question it, and that's where people get away with it. You can't, if you're someone who works in a theme park and you see someone who has a service animal that very clearly is a pet, you can't say, that's obviously a pet, ma'am.
We need to see your credentials. Yeah, you're not gonna
exactly, and you can't do that, and that's rough. But again, that gives the respect to those who do actually need it and don't want to share what the reason may be. So just don't abuse the system. Like, it's rude.
Yeah, it's not for you.
No.
And there's a reason why it's not for you.
Yeah.
Huh. Strange, but all kinds of strange, stupid things happening out there. All right, the last two I feel like are really common ones that probably everyone can relate to. The first one is, let's just all get on the same page about this. If you are replying all on an email that is where like you are one person who is like copied. Do not do it.
Just don't.
Can we agree? We're not going to do that in
It
2024.
seems it seems easy enough to me. When it irks me the most, like if it's a lengthy reply that then it's like I didn't need to be on this, but okay, whatever. But it really makes me mad when it's like, okay, thanks.
Yes, that's the thing. That they're always just
When
like
they're
that.
so concise, it's like nobody
Always.
needs to know.
Right. And it's like I have 12 new messages and they're all that being like,
Yeah,
got it. See you then. What?
yeah.
Absolutely not.
I don't know if everyone's Outlook has this now, but my Outlook at work now has a feature you can react to a message, like a thumbs up, a
Oh,
smile. So that is my favorite feature because I'll send out,
nice
and people
outlook.
use it. I'll send out an email and I'll get these notifications like, oh, 6 people thumbs up your message. I'm like, oh, great. They saw it. They're on
Perfect.
board. No one else needs to know what they said. Great.
That's actually
So
a very good feature. Thank you for
I
that
like it.
outlook because, yeah, a lot of times people who do it, again, I don't think they have a bad intention. They want to just acknowledge that they received your message, but they
Yeah.
can, so it's fine. You can respond, thank you, or whatever, short message, but just make sure you're replying only to the person who sent it to you in that case.
Yeah.
And we can also probably be better as senders of emails at like blind copying people too, if it is
Hmm.
appropriate. So that's the thing
Yeah.
you can do too, which you might not know about, is you can send a message to 100 different people and they don't even see that you sent it to who else you sent it to.
And they have no
BC.
ability to reply all.
Yeah, and then you can't reply all. So
Yep. We love
think
a
about that on
BCC
both
moment.
ends.
Yeah.
Mhm. You
We
love
do.
a BCC. All right, last one, which is one that like I'm sure I've experienced this in my life, but it's been a while because I get to stay home way too often these days. But commenting to like coworkers or even family members, really anyone, things like you look tired. Do
Oh,
people say things like this to each other?
they absolutely do.
So
And
I've
I
heard.
don't know why. Well, I will say too, I get it, not like a lot, but clearly, like, you know me, and maybe it's obvious, I enjoy wearing makeup. I
Yeah.
wear it pretty much every day. I think it's fun. I like it. When I don't have it on, I do look quite different.
Yeah.
And if I happen to go to work that way, it's an immediate, "Oh, you look tired. Are you okay? What's wrong?" And it's like, yes, I look dramatically different than what you normally see me as, but that does not automatically mean something is wrong in any sense.
Right. And like,
And
thanks a lot.
yeah, and again, I don't think I look tired. I look different.
Yeah. And you don't know why, and maybe I don't want you to know why. But also, if you
Yeah,
just paid attention to my face, you would know it's because I just don't have as much makeup on today. Like, whatever, move on with your
yeah.
life. I
But yeah,
just never.
that one is rude.
It's one thing to think it, but the
Mhm.
amount of times that we got something like this, and this is also something like my husband was like, yeah, people say this all the time, like because he has a job where he goes out to the world, he goes out into the world every day and has to see people, and he's like, oh yeah, no, people will say that, and I
They
just,
love to comment on it. We
it's
should not be
very,
commenting on anyone's appearance, whether it's negative, positive, because there are so many weird triggers for people.
yeah,
Like, if
that's
someone's losing weight and you're like, "Oh, you look amazing, you're losing weight," we can approach that differently. Because then you might just be making them think, "Oh, I looked terrible before."
right. Yeah, you never
Like
know what message you're sending. So that's an excellent point that like there is, let's be more interested in each other in general. That like the least interesting things about all of us as people are like how we look. Like yes, it's fun to wear
yes.
makeup. It's fun to wear ridiculous Christmas sweaters. But yeah, I would never feel comfortable saying like something like that to someone because again, you never know what's going on with them. They could be like,
Mhm.
"Thanks, I was up with my kid all night because he's throwing up and is super sick, and I'm so stressed about having to be at work today because my kid's really sick." Or there's
Yeah.
just all kinds of horrible things that
Mhm.
people could be going through. And even if it's not, like maybe they stayed out and had too many drinks, they don't have to tell you about it.
Yeah,
Like
because they're still at work and they're gonna do their job.
exactly. So I just think
Yeah.
it's, yeah, it's a very weird comment to make or anything like that of like, and again, if it's coming from a good place of like, you just want to be like, hey, how are you today? Say, hey, how are you today? And then they can share or not.
Exactly. But yeah, especially in the workplace, it's hard because there's there's a boundary between the things you discuss with your coworkers. Um,
Yeah.
and a lot of
I would
people
Megan, I would not even
like
say that
to
to
share so
you.
much.
I would not say that to you if I thought like, "Man, damn, Megan looks tired." Like, I would not say that to you. It's just
Yeah,
rude.
it is rude. But you would very kindly say, "Hey, how are you?" And I'd
Yeah,
probably tell you. And I'd
exactly.
say, "I'm tired."
Yeah, so again, I'm sure if you've said something like this and you're, like, grasping at your pearls like, "Oh, no, I didn't mean to offend anyone," like, it can absolutely come from a good place and sometimes not come off that way, so
Yeah.
self-awareness, just you're welcome, and that maybe you're not stupid, but, like, we all do stupid things sometimes, and we're just here to try to make us better, so
That's the goal.
I think we've done a good start to some serious public service here. What do you think?
Yeah, I feel pretty good about it. I hope the people who need to listen will.
Yeah.
Um, Maybe if
So
you know someone, share
yeah,
the episode and say,
yeah.
"Oh, this is interesting. I learned a lot of things. Maybe you
Or
would
even
learn
like, "Isn't
something."
this hilarious? This person, like, can you believe people do this? Ha ha, listen to this." And then
Yeah.
yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah,
that's
definitely you're gonna this one's gonna have to be shared a lot because I don't know if your base audience, if they're the ones submitting these questions,
right. Then clearly they're
they
on
must know
the same
something.
wavelength here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
share it with the people who need to hear it,
yes,
and we'll
that's a
work on a tiny little handbook.
yes, and yes, if you next Christmas, if you wanna, buy a handbook, stick in everybody's stocking along with their lump of
Oh, a
coal.
stocking stuffer, I like that.
It's
I love a good
festive too,
stocking stuffer.
for
Of
everyone
course.
on your Christmas list, because even if they don't personally need it, they're gonna have that annoying roommate maybe in the future, or, you know, they're gonna have their grandma who's over at their house that's telling them they look tired and is
Oof,
commenting on, everything about how they look.
grandma.
So it's just handy to have it there on the coffee
Yeah,
table,
and, at worst or, if you learn nothing, maybe you'll at least have a good laugh
Exactly. That's what we hope. That's what we're
or a
here for.
cry.
Well, yeah, or like, "Oh, no," moment of self-reflection, but that's okay because self-awareness is very real and very important, and that's what I was thinking about actually as this entire conversation we've been having is, like, everything that we're talking about really comes down to that of we don't want you to be paranoid of thinking like, "I'm upsetting people," or "I'm constantly out there just being stupid in the world." No, no. But, be aware because we all are going to do things. We're not perfect. But sometimes, like, you think about how often you come across all these things that we talked about today. And if everybody could just be a little bit more aware, we'd all have a lot
Mhm.
less stress and frustration in our life, I think.
Seems easy enough.
A brighter, better 2024, all because of us here
Ooh,
at Peace, Love, and Baseball. Oh,
that's the
man,
slogan right there.
feels good to do the work. Feels good to get dirty and get in there. Well, Megan,
Someone's got to.
tell the people, as I mentioned, you have some really entertaining tutorials for makeup and different, like, all the best products too. Anytime I need a makeup product, I'm like, Megan, what eyeliner do you use? What mascara do you use? What's your favorite lip color? Like, hook me up. So you're absolutely a great resource for that. But you're also doing something that's one of my favorite annual traditions that you do on your social media this year, and that is we're mid 12 days of Meeksmas. So first,
It's a
tell
good
us what
time.
Meeksmas is, and then tell the people where they can follow you to follow Meeksmas and more.
Of course. So Meeksmas is a countdown to Christmas. It is the 12 days leading up to Christmas. I think the first year I did it was because, and correct me if I'm wrong because you were there, we couldn't go home for Christmas. It was
Yes,
our first new time in New York. We had no money. Going home for
yes,
Christmas was not an option. And I was like, I'm going to share something fun with my
yeah.
family back home, and my friends who I don't get to go see. So I was like, wouldn't it be funny if I dressed up my cat, whose name is Miko, in a different holly jolly situation for the 12 days leading up to Christmas? And I did that, and people enjoyed it. It brought them joy. They laughed, and it was very interactive. And I was like, all right, we'll do it again next year. And I've just kept doing it. We are on year 11.
And people are like really into it. There's like when you post the first picture every year, everyone's like, I've been waiting for this.
Yeah, they are like
Media sensation.
fully hyped. Yeah. It's a fun time. One year I did 25 days of Miko. That was too much. I will not be doing that again. But the 12 days of Miko is fun. One year he was featured on Seth Meyers. That was very exciting.
Yeah.
He's a famous cat. So yeah, keep him. I'll keep him coming. And I haven't posted, but I will start posting them on my Instagram. It's Miss Megza, MISSMEGSA. Instagram and Facebook are kind of my only areas of social media anymore. I left the Twitter train. Elon Musk is just not my cup of tea, and I didn't want to be there anymore. So I am no longer there. I do miss it sometimes, but Instagram, and I'll put all the Meeksmith picture up there.
Yeah, well, I mentioned obviously you have the visual talents as well, and another thing that I guess probably makes Meeksmith more entertaining than if like someone like me did it is you have a very good eye for like taking cute, attractive photos as well. And Miko I could never do this with my cat because our cats, while they are brothers, have very different personalities. And the other thing that you should know about Miko is that like he has nothing against being dressed up. He actually enjoys it. He's been playing with his costume here. Yeah. So no cats are harmed in the making of Meeksmith, but my cat would not tolerate it even for a second. So you will never see a 12 Days of Raja, and that's why you need to go follow at Miss Megza on Instagram and beyond. So obviously we'll throw that in the show notes. Megan, thank you so much. We did really good work today. High five from across the globe here, across the country, at least. And thank you for your time, your talents, and just being, a source of wisdom. And as I like to say, a common sense connoisseur, because we really can't take that for granted these days. So thank you.
I try. Of course. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. And we'll work on the handbook for next year.
Yeah, coming at you in 2025. But a very happy holidays to all you peace, love, and baseball listeners out there. Of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Kbird Tweets, which is here in the corner. I never know. I never can point to it. I'm doing it.
You got it.
And if you're there, and if you're not there, you can find me on Instagram at peace.love.baseball. Get to one of those two spots. You find the link tree. You find everything else you could ever want of where you can listen, where you can watch. So subscribe, rate, review, and make sure that you're ready for more peace, love, and baseball in 2024. Have an amazing holiday season, and I'll catch you then.